The deadliest plane crash in history, it didn't happen at 30,000 feet. It happened on the ground, in a thick bank of fog, on an island runway where neither of the two planes involved was even scheduled to land. So, how on earth did this happen? Let's get into it.
Just to grasp the sheer scale of what we're talking about, let's start with this number, 583. That's how many people died on March 27, 1977. It's a number that made this a catastrophe on a scale nobody had ever seen before.
So that brings us to the big question, right? How is it even possible for two massive, state-of-the-art jumbo jets, both with experienced crews, to crash into each other on the same runway? Well, the answer is this absolutely terrifying chain of small, seemingly disconnected events that all lined up in the worst possible way. Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in Spain's Canary Islands, and we have two planes, KLM Flight 4805 and Pan Am Flight 1736. The first thing you need to know is that neither of them was ever supposed to be at the tiny Los Rodeos Airport on the island of Tenerife. They were headed to a much bigger airport on the nearby island of Gran Canaria.
So what went wrong? It all started with a bomb. A separatist group planted a small bomb that went off in the terminal at their real destination, Gran Canaria. So authorities shut the airport down, and they started diverting all these huge planes, including our two 747s, to the little regional airport at Los Rodeos, which was just not equipped to handle them.
To really understand how a disaster like this unfolds, we're going to use a tool that accident investigators use. It's called the Swiss cheese model, and honestly, it is the perfect way to see how a bunch of small, unrelated problems can line up to create one giant catastrophe. Okay, so picture a stack of Swiss cheese slices. Each slice is a layer of safety, a procedure, a technology, a person. The holes in the cheese are little individual failures. Now, most of the time, the holes don't line up and a problem gets stopped. But on that day in Tenerife, the holes in every single slice, they lined up perfectly. Let's look at each layer.
So, slice number 1, the airport itself. The hole in this slice? That bomb. It was the first domino to fall. It created a problem that shouldn't have existed. Two giant jumbo jets being forced to land at an airport that was just way too small for them.
Then you have the second slice, the actual conditions on the airfield. The airport was so packed with diverted planes that the main taxiway was blocked. This meant both the KLM and the Pan Am jets had to use the active runway as a taxiway. And just as they're doing this, a thick, soupy fog rolls in, and visibility drops to practically nothing. And this leads us to our next layer of cheese. Air traffic control told the Pan Am crew to get off the runway using the third taxiway. The problem? That exit required a nearly 150-degree turn. For a massive 747, that's almost impossible. So the Pan Am crew, lost in the fog and confused by the instruction, just kept on rolling down the runway, hoping to find an easier exit.
But the airport and the weather, that was only half the story. To really get this, we have to look at the human element. Specifically, we have to talk about what was going on in the mind of the KLM captain, a guy named Jacob Veldhuizen van Zanten. And the real irony here is that he was KLM's head of flight training.
Captain Van Zanten was under this really weird kind of pressure. He was a top instructor, but that meant he hadn't actually flown a real passenger route in months. He was also getting really stressed about new Dutch regulations on how long a crew could work, so he was in a huge rush. To try and save time later on, he makes this critical decision to top off the fuel tanks in Tenerife. But that choice adds another 35 minutes to the delay, letting the fog get even worse, and it makes his plane way, way heavier.
So we have the fog, the congested runway, the captain in a hurry. All of that is the perfect storm for the next and maybe most critical failure of all, a complete and total breakdown in communication, right when it mattered most.
Just look how fast this all happens. The KLM crew asks for their takeoff clearance. The tower gives them their flight path instructions for after they take off. But, and this is so important, he never actually says the words cleared for takeoff. The KLM first officer reads back the instructions, and then he adds a phrase that will seal their fate. The captain hears it, says, "We're going," and pushes the throttles to the wall.
This is it. This is the phrase that dooms him. We are now at takeoff. That is not standard language. Does it mean we are in position and ready for takeoff? Or does it mean we are in the process of taking off right now? The captain, feeling the pressure, heard the second one and went for it.
The controller in the tower heard that strange phrase and tried to slam on the brakes, telling them to wait. But at that exact same second,
Another pilot keyed their mic, and it created this horrible, high-pitched screeching sound in the KLM cockpit. They never heard the controller say stand by.
And that other pilot, that was the Pan Am first officer. He heard the KLM crew say they were at takeoff, and he frantically tried to warn everyone that they were still on the runway. But because he transmitted at the exact same time as the tower, his urgent warning got lost in that exact same radio squeal.
Even then, there was one final chance. The KLM flight engineer, hearing something was wrong in the garbled transmission, actually asks the captain directly, is he not clear, that Pan American? But the captain, his mind made up, just shuts him down with a single, forceful, oh yes.
And with that one fatal assumption, the KLM 747 was now thundering down a foggy runway, completely blind, hurtling directly towards the Pan Am jet, which was still taxiing right towards them.
The Pan Am crew saw the KLM's landing lights burst through the fog just seconds away. Their captain did the only thing he could. He slammed the throttles to full power and yanked the plane left, trying to get off onto the grass. The KLM captain saw them at the same instant and pulled back on the controls so violently that the plane's tail scraped along the runway for over 20 meters. He got the plane into the air, but just not high enough. The KLM's landing gear and engines sliced right through the top of the Pan Am jet, which immediately exploded into a fireball. The KLM plane, fatally damaged and full of fuel, slammed back down onto the runway and disintegrated. Every single person on the KLM flight was killed. On the Pan Am jet, though, amidst all that horror, 61 people, including the pilots, somehow managed to survive.
A disaster of this magnitude forces people to ask hard questions. The investigation that followed exposed such a profound chain of failures that it basically forced the entire aviation world to completely rethink how pilots and air traffic controllers talk to each other.
And this, right here, is probably the single biggest legacy of Tenerife. See, before this crash, the captain was God in the cockpit. Their authority was absolute. Afterwards, the industry created something called Crew Resource Management, or CRM. It completely changed the culture. It not only empowers, it requires a first officer or a flight engineer to speak up and challenge the captain if they think something is unsafe.
And it wasn't just about culture. They changed the literal rule book. Ambiguous phrases were banned. The word takeoff became sacred. Today, you will only ever hear it used in one single phrase, cleared for takeoff. Any other time, pilots and controllers have to use the word departure. And of course, that little airport, which had no way of seeing the planes in the fog, finally got ground radar installed.
In the end, what happened at Tenerife is just this powerful, tragic reminder. For all of our incredible technology, for all the amazing engineering that goes into these planes, maybe the most important safety system of all is just how well we, as human beings, communicate with each other.